You're logging into the Lower Columbia Canoe Club's third safety talk, third in a 5-part series. And we're going to get underway in just a second. We're going to give folks one more minute because they just keep coming. And then we'll start the show. In fact, let's do this. While we're waiting for our last few folks to get in. Okay, we're at 6:35. So I think what we'll do is we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. Oh, one more person who wants to join. My name is Deborah Kane, and I am the president of the Lower Columbia Canoe Club. And for those of you that perhaps heard about the safety series on Facebook and have no idea who we are a Portland, Oregon-based paddling club. And like paddling clubs all across the country, because of COVID, we've been doing a lot less in-person paddling. And we thought, well, we're not going to let COVID get the best of us. We're going to use our time wisely. And so we decided that this spring, as we wait for the vaccinations to be more widely available and for the numbers to go down in our community, we decided that we would gather online and that we would use the time to learn and brush up on both our safety skills, but also we've been doing what we call takeout talks, which are geared a little bit more toward just improving your paddling overall. So on one hand, the Lower Columbia Canoe Club has been putting on this 5-part safety series. So if you're joining us for the first time tonight, you're actually joining us for the third talk. We had 2 others in the last few weeks. And as I was saying, as folks were joining us, we got a lot of folks on the line with perfect attendance so far, which is exciting. We started out with a conversation on ropes and signals. We moved from there onto a really great discussion about heuristic traps, which we did record, and I'm going to tell you where that recording is. Tonight, we've got kind of a legend with Charlie Walbridge talking us through accident reporting and what we can learn from accident reporting and how it might inform our own paddling and the decisions we make, either individually or with the groups that we're with. And then these safety talks, which are free and open to the public, have been taking place every other Tuesday. So just in case you're not aware of the full series, coming up 2 weeks from tonight, we're going to be talking about Whitewater Judgment with Priscilla Macy, who's a little bit of a local legend here in the Northwest. And then we'll conclude the series on April 13th with a conversation with Teresa, who goes by Tree, is that right? Yeah. Rogerson on fitness for form and injury prevention. So heuristics was recorded, accident reporting with Charlie is going to be recorded. Then last 2 in our 5-part series will be recorded. There was a tiny little bit of maybe user error. I've been calling it technical error, but it might have been user error. And we did not get the ropes and signals one recorded, but we do have a nice write-up on it, which you can find online. And I'm going to show you where that is in just a sec. So safety series, free and open to anyone. Spread the word if you think you've got folks in your paddling circles that might want to join us in the next few weeks. And then apart from I'm just like you, Charlie. There we go. Apart from the free safety talks, we also are hosting some members only talks. And these members only talks have encouraged people from all across the country to join the Lower Columbia Canoe Club. You don't have to feel like you have to live in the Pacific Northwest to join us, because it only costs $25 to join the club and you get access to all this great online content. So not tomorrow, it was supposed to be tomorrow. The date got rescheduled. On Thursday, March 18th at noon Pacific time, so 3 o'clock for folks that are on the East Coast, we're having a conversation with Noria Newman, and she's going to talk us through the whole concept of fear as a social construct, which I'm really looking forward to. And then in April, on Wednesday, April 7th, we're going to be joined by Rafa Ortiz, who I think a lot of folks in the kayaking world might know as someone who hurls himself over waterfalls, but he's also a huge river conservationist, and he's going to join us as we award our 2021 River Conservation Award. The Lower Columbia Canoe Club always gives out a River Conservation Award every year, and this year Rafa will join us to make the presentation, talk to us about river conservation, and also about tips for running waterfalls. From there, we've got Anna Levesque, who I think a lot of folks on the East Coast would know. She's going to join us for a whole course on yoga for paddling. So check out the takeout talks if you're not already familiar with them. And then, finally, if you head to the website and you see the website address at the bottom, you'll also note that for members only, we've got a bunch of in-person classes coming up, not the least of which is a 2-day river rescue course offered twice. So you can take it May 1st to May 2nd or May 8th to May 9th. A 2-day river rescue course, swiftwater river rescue, I should say, with Wet Planet. And then we've also got a kayaking skills clinic coming up for women boaters. So, and then Horst, I want to answer your question specifically about where you can find things once they've been recorded. So again, for folks that are not familiar with us, we're the Lower Columbia Canoe Club. You can find us online. And when you find us online, if you just hit our calendar of events tab and then just scroll down, you get a running list of a lot of the things that I just talked about, right? By date, all the events that are coming up. But at the very bottom of the page, we also archive all of the events that we've already hosted. So for example, that talk on heuristics, you'll find at the bottom of the page, it already happened, it's X'd out on the calendar. But if you click into view the event, that is exactly where we've got the slide deck and the recording. And so that will be true for tonight's talk and for all the other talks in the series. If you missed them, just head to the Lower Columbia Canoe Club's website. And while you're there, oh my gosh, might as well click that join button so that you'll have access to some of the other online content. So with that, yay, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We got lots of people in the waiting room. I gotta get back to my waiting room duties. And so I'm gonna hand it over to the Lower Columbia Canoe Club's amazing safety chair, Teresa Gryder. Teresa is single-handedly responsible for putting together our 5-part safety series. If you've joined us for the first 2, you know it's been phenomenal. I have every expectation that tonight's discussion will be equally great. And so Teresa, I'm going to hand it over to you and have you introduce Charlie. And then Charlie, I'm also going to let you share your screen. So I'm going to get out of my screen share and we'll go to you, Teresa.
Okay. And Charlie, feel free to work on your screen share while I'm talking if you'd like. Hi, everybody. So happy to see such a crowd showing up for this event. I just want to say a few words about Charlie because he's been kind of a major person in my development as a paddler. I knew him by name only starting in the 1980s when I was working in the NOC store. And we used to get these little pamphlets that were like river safety reports for years 1981 to 1983 or whatever it was. I forget which years it was. And I would get these pamphlets and I would take them home and I would read them all night long and I would not sleep. And they were terrifying. And I did this every time a new one came out. I would read them again. And I don't know if it was a great idea, but what it did was make me very acutely aware of all the ways that you can make mistakes. It really, it made me afraid, but in a realistic way. And somehow I'm still here. I lived in West Virginia for one season in the 90s, and I got to meet Charlie and paddle with Charlie and his wife, Sandy, on the Big Sandy. And that was a wonderful experience. And I got to find out that he's really a gentle man and a keen thinker and a kind heart, and that he does all of this because he wants to help us save ourselves. And so he's here today because he wants to keep doing that. He wants to keep educating us as to how can we protect each other and protect the new people to paddling, especially those who are just now coming in, from the risks that they don't even know about. Charlie started paddling in a summer camp, right?
Right.
Yeah. What summer camp did you go to?
The name of the camp was Mowgli. It was in central New Hampshire.
Central New Hampshire.
But it wasn't really Whitewater. We ran one rapid, and the rapid did not go particularly well, but I was very fortunate. I'm a big guy, and I had a little guy in the bow, and we hit a rock that we were supposed to avoid head on, and we just went right over it. Danny was pretty mad with me because he was the best canoeist at camp, and I humiliated him by taking the canoe over the rock rather than around it. But heck, I didn't know exactly what I was doing, and I'm not sure Danny did.
Mm-hmm. And then you were in a college outing club after that?
I started a college outing club with my roommate, and he
Okay.
was the newest. And so 1967, he took me canoeing on Penn's Creek, which is a little class 2 creek about an hour from the college. And on the one hand, I was scared because I really hadn't run. I'd only run that one rapid. But here we are running like, 2 very full days of fast moving river. Although really the most dangerous thing was whenever you got to a bridge, there were trout fishermen out there. And you didn't want to hit one of them because they could be angry when provoked. But I also remember just going down through this beautiful valley and looking around because I'd done a lot of backpacking, and I said, "This is amazing. It's so beautiful, and I don't have to carry a pack."
Yeah, that's a very good thing about it. And then you are responsible for Wildwater Designs, the company. That was your company.
Yeah, I ran that for about 22 years and sold life jacket kits and spray skirt kits. We were probably the first people to sell the rescue bag. I didn't invent it. It was a Navy idea that a guy from Red Cross, Ray Miller, put me onto.
Mm-hmm. I remember Wildwater Designs because the catalogs always had amazing photographs on the cover.
Yeah, but in the mid 80s, I started working with the first photo came from Whitewater, but after that, started working with Kevin O'Brien, and he was a wonderful photographer. He's still active, just haven't seen him in a while.
Mm-hmm.
Teresa and Charlie, I just wanted to let you know we've had one comment or a few comments actually that's a little hard to hear, Charlie. So you might need to, come in a little closer to your mic.
Come in closer, or I can use that, or I can plug in headphones.
Up to you. Just, the more you can project, the better.
Okay. Well, if it gets bad, don't hesitate to break in.
Great.
And this is probably a good place to start the slide run through. First, I've got to share my screen, and then I've got to start the slideshow. And this is when after college, I really got involved with the paddling community, and this would have been 1970, 71, 72. And these were the big things that were going on back then. First, you had the movie Deliverance, and I never thought of Deliverance as particularly promoting canoe trips, but a lot of people were really excited and wanted to go out on a river, hopefully not being chased by crazy armed hillbillies. And then the other one was this fellow on the right, Jamie McEwen, who won a bronze medal at the 1972 Olympics. Jamie was the first American to win a medal in a major international competition, and he inspired a whole generation of paddlers. One of them was, of course, John Leadville and Davy Hearn, who were multi-time national and U.S. champions. He inspired me, but I couldn't keep up with him. And I also thought I'd put up here the AMC Whitewater Handbook for Canoe and Kayak. Back when we were starting in college, there were no clinics. It was very hard to learn anything, but got a hold of this book, and we taught ourselves to roll out of the book with many fits and starts. We were also very fortunate to get in touch with the Penn State Outing Club. John Sweet invited us to the school session, and it was quite an eye-opener, because in addition to the usual, undergrads like ourselves who were just learning, they had grad students like Norm Holcomb and Tom Irwin, who were nationally ranked. They had all the hot kids from the Wildwater Boating Club of Belfont, with who Dave Kurtz was training. So it was pretty neat, and it opened our eyes and taught us a lot of things. Now, I really got into slalom racing. I at one time I had ambitions, and I got ranked in the A division, which is like the top 15 to 20 in each class. But I never made the U.S. Whitewater team, and I think the highest I ever finished in the national event was 7th. But I loved the races. There was a circuit. I mean, you could go from an event in Petersburg, then to Tarrafil, then to Mascoma, then back to Savage, maybe over to the Yacht. I mean, there was something going every couple of weeks, and you see the same people, and you learned a lot from watching them. And at one of these races, there was a fatality, and of all places, it was the icebreaker slalom. As you can see from the picture on the left, that's the site of the accident, but at low water. When they had races, water went up about a foot and a half. But you can see it's not very difficult. It's class 1 with a little class 2 wave underneath the bridge. And I was just peeling out of an upstream gate, and I looked downstream, and I knew there was trouble. I mean, when you see people moving around sort of jerkily and stiffly and yelling, you know there's trouble, because people don't act that way on the shore normally. So I pulled over, ran down the shore, and there was a guy in the middle of the wave that was formed by this little ledge, and he was underwater. And I'd never seen anything like that before, and I didn't know what the heck to do. There were a couple of yacht guides, and back then the yacht guides were probably the best rescuers we had. Yacht guide just jumped in and tried to swim by and grab him, but that didn't work. And then a bunch of us got the idea that we were all going to get in the river, and we were going to block the river. And by blocking the river, it was going to divert the water so they could go in and grab him. Well, that didn't work. As soon as we started blocking the river and diverting the river, it pushed us downstream. But what eventually happened is somebody got up to the dam, they turned off the water, and they went and got him out, and his foot was caught underneath a rock. Now, I hadn't really seen anything like that before, or heard anything about that, and it really upset me, because I figured if you were an experienced paddler, wore your life jacket and helmet, and didn't do anything that was completely nuts, you were safe. Well, I went and talked to OK Goodwin, who was the safety chair of American Whitewater back then, and King said, well, I think it's a freak accident. Well, I didn't like that answer very much, so I talked to a lot of people and wrote an accident report, which went into a bunch of canoe magazines. Not canoe magazines, but canoe newsletters. Then I started getting letters back. People said, there was something just like this over on the Obed. There was something just like this over on the Nantahala. And so this whole foot entrapment thing was something that was real, and something that we had to pay attention to, and something that we could avoid. And I wrote the accident report up for American Whitewater, and that resulted in a couple of things. One of them was that a year later, when Bob Taylor, who was arguably one of the best paddler in the state of West Virginia, was killed on the Gauley, his friends called me up and they wanted me to write up the accident. And those accident reports got me a request to do an article for Canoe Magazine, and that's what you see in the bottom, avoiding entrapment. They didn't want me to use names. I use names because I think that names make things much more real. It's a real person, not just Joe X or a 33-year-old man. It makes it more real. And there are two kinds of people in the world. There are the people who are very nervous, scared, whatever, and they don't really need to be reading accident reports. My wife is one of these. She read my accident report summary for American Whitewater and had nightmares for about 3 nights. She doesn't read my stuff anymore. But there are other people who are much more casual, and these are the people who I'm trying to reach. And you can see that avoiding entrapment, it took bow pinning. There's a foot entrapment. Bar type foot braces were causing accidents in a lot of different places. We don't use bar type foot braces anymore. We went to pedals, and now pretty much bulkheads. And then of course entrapment in a boat. But American Whitewater has been trying to help people learn from our mistakes for a very long time. The first safety code was 1957. Now, of course, it's been revised many times. I don't think this is the most recent revision. I think there was another one in 2005. But the idea is that boaters are pretty smart people. You have to be smart in order to learn how to paddle. And you're just trying to make people aware of what's going on, so that because when people are aware, they'll do what's needed to be safe. And we also believe in education, not regulation. Last thing AW or American Canoe Association wants is to be rating paddlers or testing people for skills. The Appalachian Mountain Club does that, and truthfully, a lot of people start paddling with the Appies and then they go paddle somewhere else because the structure is too rigid for most of them. These are cartoons which Dean Norman, he did Hallmark cards for a living, but he also did a bunch of safety cartoons for us. But that was 45 years ago. And a lot has happened since then. The boats are better and better and better, and the sport is more visible. It has attracted amazingly talented athletes. I think of about the 50 guys who I used to boat with back in the 70s. Maybe 1 or 2 of them could run with this crowd. It's really pretty remarkable. And uncommon skills have become common. That American Whitewater in the center, that's my old buddy Martin Begun running Potter's Falls. And when that picture went on the cover, people were outraged. There were nasty letters to the editor for an issue or two. And they published something saying, that this is a very special waterfall and that it probably wasn't safe to run any other waterfalls. Now, this is 73. By 1979, Wick Walker wrote, "Waterfalls, forbidden fruit, or calculated risk." And again, there was some pushback. And I wrote a little sidebar just essentially saying that you better think twice before you run a waterfall. And if you don't know what you're doing, you probably shouldn't do it. But now, this is 1992, the Paddler, the nation's top runnable waterfalls. And about 10 years ago, I was listening to 2 guys talk, and one guy was referring to a drop as an easy 50-footer. An easy 50-footer. And I'm saying, wait a minute, back in the 70s, the highest thing I think that was run was Elgin Falls, and Fred Young did it after breaking up with his girlfriend. So a lot has happened. And mostly this is done without a lot of people getting killed or injured, but each move brings new attention. Walt Blackadar got a lot of people running big whitewater, and that's when what I call flush drowning started to happen. Somebody bails out of a kayak and swims. Even though they got a life jacket, they drown. And then there was a squirt boat era, and for a while there were people who were saying the squirt boat is the perfect boat. It's perfect for every situation. The dense boat theory. Well, there was one year where squirt boats, which were probably about maybe 2% of the total kayaks out there, were like 20% of the fatalities. And people, after a few people got killed, people rejiggered things. There was also a spate of deaths in the 90s during the when the new school started coming in. And the new school, those guys did a lot of things we thought were impossible. And in fact, I still remember sitting there and telling Clay Wright that this running waterfalls was just ridiculous. And he sat me down and just explained what people thought about when they were running a waterfall. And it was a good education. But I'd say probably, 90, 97, 98, they had like a 15% fatality rate in the US freestyle team. So people needed to recalibrate what they're doing. And the way people recalibrate is we talk about accidents. Most of us will never encounter a fatal accident, but we can learn a lot from talking about them. And people are pushing the limits and doing things that are really quite amazing. I remember when the Upper Yacht was considered, oh my, that's one of the hardest rivers around. Now on a weekend you get hundreds of people on it, and people run it all through the winter. And aside from a few interesting experiences with ice, they do all right. But the important thing is to keep your brain in gear and to keep thinking about what the actual risks are, because to paraphrase a well-known mountaineer, just because you love the river doesn't mean that the river loves you. In fact, the river really doesn't care. 1980 was a big year because that's when the first river rescue class started. Why did it start? Because in the summer of 1979, a guide at NOC, Rick Bernard, was pinned in Jawbone Rapid on Section 4 of the Chattooga. And at that time, the NOC guides were probably, some of the best prepared river people in the country, and they couldn't help him. And so over the winter, Les Bechtel and Slim Ray sat down and they developed one of the first swiftwater rescue courses taught in the US, and the first one that was aimed entirely at paddlers. Now, I also learned a lot from guiding. The picture on the top right, the black and white, that's me working for NOC, guiding Section 3 of the Chattooga on a rather high water day. And then the other two pictures are in the Cheat Canyon at high water. Generally, the Cheat Canyon is a lot lower, and we used a format that was called guide assisted trips, which meant that there were no guides in the boats, and there were just people running around showing them where to go and helping them out when they got into trouble, which was often. And you got a lot of experience dealing with problems. And I really admired the guys who I work with. When something went wrong, they weren't fiddling with ropes. They just dove into the water and swam out there and started fixing it, which brings me to the first rule: get as close as you can to the problem. The ACA river course is something that developed in the 90s. I wasn't really thrilled with the NOC course. I thought it was too ropes oriented. I took our Rescue 3 course out in California, and interesting thing about those guys, most of their instructors are ex-Navy SEALs, and I'll tell you what, those boys can swim. I mean, I was 25 years younger then, and pretty much a strong rapid swimmer, and they ran me ragged. And I started a course called Whitewater Self-Defense, which was swimming, wading, and throw bags, essentially getting people comfortable being in the water, swimming out to help somebody, throwing a rope, unpinning a boat. And then one of the guys who took my course is down in the lower left-hand corner. That's a picture of him when he became director of emergency response for a county in central New Jersey. He was much younger when he and I worked together, but he had a rescue squad background. He worked with ropes, and he and I put together a course that we both liked. And of course, now Wayne is retired and I'm just instructing, and there's a committee of about 20 people that keeps the thing moving. And it's a pretty good program. The best thing is when somebody comes up to me and says, "Hey, I took your course and such happened and I knew how to handle it." We also started working fairly early on trying to educate first responders, firefighters particularly. And the picture at the top left you see is the infamous part of the infamous Binghamton disaster. A group of those three firefighters went into this horrendous backwash of a Lowhead Dam on a flooded Susquehanna because they saw something floating in it and they thought it might be a person. The boat flipped. All three of them were in the water. A second boat went in to help them. That boat flipped, put two in the water, and when the dust settled, two of them were dead. And needless to say, when something like that happens and it involves a kayaking accident, people are really upset because you read about these firefighters and they're normally young guys in their 20s and 30s with a family tied into the community, and they take out a lot of their hostility on boaters. So we figured that if we didn't reach out, that there was going to be some serious backwash. But it's tough to work with firefighters because you're not one of them. The only boaters they've ever met are the turkeys who they're pulling off the river in one form or another. But then the Department of Natural Resources Division of Watercraft in Ohio developed a swiftwater rescue program, and the way it came together was fascinating. They had two bad dam fatalities back to back over several weeks. One of in each case, they lost a firefighter, and the head of the Division of Watercraft was a botanist. His name was Norval Hall, and you're thinking, well, what the hell is a botanist going to do about dam safety? Well, Norval's a scientist. He got together as many people from as many different places who were experienced as he possibly could, and one of the results was the river rescue course. The state of Pennsylvania started a river rescue course aimed at first responders, but starting a little bit more basic, like this is a life jacket and this is how you put it on. But the thing about both of these things is all of a sudden it wasn't just us boaters teaching. It was people who represented state agencies, and that gave the discipline of swiftwater rescue a lot more credibility. And I did, after those programs got going, I did a couple of symposiums. We did one in Richmond. We did one in Washington, D.C., and we did one in Ohio Pile. The idea was to bring firefighters, paddlers, commercial guides, people from the Red Cross, all these people together to talk about different things about accidents and safety that they were familiar with. And I can tell you, firefighters know a hell of a lot more about organizing a large-scale rescue. Our rescues are typically just a couple of people, but they know how to manage. They have much better teamwork. The whole incident command system is very different and very effective. And I'm being interviewed there in the top picture by somebody from the Richmond TV. We always made sure we got TV coverage, and it was interesting because none of the firefighters said, "Oh wow, this is wonderful. You guys are so smart and we're so stupid." It's never going to happen. But what happened was the big companies, Richmond Bureau of Fire, Arlington, and and Fairfax Bureau of Fire, they didn't attend officially, but they sent people unofficially. And then after the clinic, they hired Rescue 3 to put all their people through training. And to me, that's a win. Now let's talk a little bit about about what the numbers have told us over the years. I'm only doing the last 25 years because really, you know, the first 10 years, I was mostly getting letters through the mail and an occasional phone call. It wasn't until the mid 90s that I started getting emails pretty consistently. And of course, in the last 10 years or so, truthfully, I get most of my accidents reports via Facebook. And it's like, whatever works, whatever makes it easier for people. And you can see these annual totals bounce up and down a lot. Basically, those numbers coincide with high water years. And you can also see the number of people not wearing PFDs is pretty standard, but it seems to be going up. And this year, it took a big jump. Reason it took a big jump? Well, we had COVID. People were looking for things to do. They went out to buy a kayak. Every place that sold kayaks was completely sold out. They got out on the water and they had trouble. And some of the stuff is really heartbreaking. You know, family goes out and buys kayaks and they're going to this little local stream, no whitewater, no nothing. And all it takes is a little fast current in a tree. And all of a sudden you've got yourself a pretty desperate situation. You can also see the numbers east versus west. Again, these spikes pretty much coincide with high water years. While I'm thinking of it, I'd like to thank Charlie Duffy, who I've known for many years. He's with the Canoe Cruisers, among other places, and he has been pulling together these graphs, which are really helpful. Accidents by cause. Flush drowning is number 1. No PFD is number 2. Low head dams number 3. Swim into tree, strainer, etc. Most accidents, you know, from a storytelling standpoint, are kind of boring. They're very repetitive. Somebody goes into a river without a life jacket. They fall in the water and they don't come up. Somebody gets out on a river. Maybe they have a life jacket, but they're not prepared for cold water. Certain things just repeat and repeat and repeat. Accidents by boat type. You can see you get all kinds of different boats. Drift boats, IKs, inner tubes, John boats. But canoes on the far left, kayaks and rafts are where the action is. There used to be a lot more canoe fatalities, but nowadays beginners don't mess with canoes. They go directly to kayaks, and these wreck boats are responsible for probably doubling the number of kayak fatalities in the last few years. Accidents by river class, nothing that you wouldn't expect. Most of the accidents are on class. Oops. Let me see if I can go backwards. There we go. Most of the accidents are on class 2, 3, and 4. Although, you know, they occur in other places. I'm not really sure where that class 6 comes from. Maybe somebody running an unrunnable waterfall. And watching accidents by months, no surprises here. Peak month is June, which is peak water and best weather. As long as it's warm, people are more inclined to get out. A couple of things. American whitewater accident reporting is incomplete. We did a study in 1999 comparing American whitewaters reporting to the U.S. Coast Guard reports. And Coast Guard gets a lot more reports than we do, but they missed some. That little green thing, those are reports that we got and the Coast Guard didn't, which surprised me because, you know, they are legally required, people are legally required to send the Coast Guard material. But one of them that I know for sure occurred in a national park. But things will always slip by. And what you can see is part of the reason that there's so many U.S. Coast Guard accidents is that there are a lot of flat water accidents, and I don't report on flat water accidents. And truthfully, as I said, they're very repetitive. Mostly no PFD, cold water, and a lot of alcohol use. When I was talking to Teresa, we thought it might be interesting to go over some fatal accidents. Now, these were picked because I have pictures of them. This is very near my house, Big Splat, Big Sandy, West Virginia. It's a drop which, if you see at the top right, that's the way to run it. You have to run it that way, because if you run down the left side, you got into this horrible sieve, which you can see the picture of on low water at the left. A guy named Jeff Mayfield, who had run the rapid, really dozens of times, came out of his boat below that top ledge, which is trickier than it looks. And he washed over the left side and disappeared. I came down there about 30 minutes later, and I was searching with about 4 people, and we couldn't find him. His friends, he was a local guy, and his friends kept a vigil there for, I think it was about 6-7 days before he finally washed out. One thing that this did do is all kinds of people were running Splat. There were some runs there that were absolutely scary. Once Jeff died, people recalibrated. And it's not that people don't run the rapid anymore. It's just that everybody scouts it. You don't see these blind runs anymore. And a lot of people carry the upper ledge drop and then get out on the ledge and scout it before running the second drop. This is a little known river in upstate New York, the Medowee. And this is the biggest drop on the Medowee. And the lower left picture, that's the kayak pins. At the top picture, you can see the hole that kayak went into, and nobody knew it was there. And needless to say, it was a fatal pinning. The thing that I thought was really quite remarkable about that is that the Adirondack Park Rangers were the ones who were called to help, and they are well trained, and they're also very good people. I've certainly heard of rescue squads coming and just barging into some place and taking over, and occasionally even arresting some of the people who are trying to rescue their buddies. They set up this system which was essentially trying to get a hook down to grab hold of the kayak's grab loop. And when they had it set up, somebody went over to the trip leader and said, I think we've got a system that we'd like to try, and if it's okay, we'd like to start now. And I think it showed a lot of respect for these folks who had just been through something really awful, and some of them had really put themselves out to try and make the rescue. This is the high water entrapment on the Green River in Washington. Green is run high a lot, and you would think going past that rock you see up at the top, you just ride the pillow. Well, this fellow tried to ride the pillow, and it didn't work out so well. There was a hidden hazard, and I'm just pulling up my other screen because I can't read the notes on this one. Yeah, this was 2008. The fellow's name was Mike Stano. His group really couldn't help him. They had to wait until the water got down enough so they could see what was happening, because he really just disappeared into that pillow. And once we know about these things, we do things differently. This was a fatality on Red Creek. The lady's name is Nancy Kell, very squared away, competent paddler. But if you look, that tether is not hooked into a quick release. It is hooked into a strap. and the tether should be releasable at both ends. And what unfortunately happened is she flipped in an area where there were a number of downed trees. The tether caught on one of those downed trees, and she was held underwater. Her group waded out to her pretty quickly and was able to rescue her. But it really pointed out that you need to know what you're doing with these rescue jackets. Now, I stopped wearing a tether because I was out on a little creek, Fikes Creek in our neighborhood, and I went into an eddy and I got the thing hooked by a tree, and I said, I just don't need any more things that I can get hooked into, so my tether is in my equipment bag. But if you're going to carry one on the outside, which I will do if I'm doing an instruction class where I'm planning on rescuing people, it's got to be releasable at both ends. If it had been releasable at both ends, this accident could have been prevented. This was an accident on the upper Ocoee River in Tennessee. The drop is called Alien Booth. And I mean, you look at that drop, it looks like an ordinary ledge. Well, the lower pictures show you just how out of the ordinary that ledge is. And what happened was a raft ran up on the pour over just to the left of that kayaker. It was a commercial trip, and Stan Guy was the trip leader, and he'd been in the business forever. He was the son of the owner, and he tried to swim out to the raft to help the rookie guy get his people off, and he went into the cave, and that's where they found him, where the water was turned off. These, this is a very dangerous place, and since this accident, both commercial and privates are taking things a lot more seriously. This is a foot entrapment site you see at the top on the South Fork American River, Troublemaker Rapid. 2 incidents, 1 death. But you can see that little pocket, that's where people's feet get caught. And what I think happens sometimes is you get flipped, you get thrown out of a boat. You got to remember to tuck your feet in and not to let your feet drag around, because they can get stuck in places, especially if the current is really wild. I'm thinking particularly of Bob Porter's death in Kings Canyon. Bob, it was him and Lars Holbeck and Chuck Stanley who explored most of the High Sierra rivers, and he got foot trapped after he bailed out of his boat in Kings Canyon. Another sieve. This is a Frog Rock. It pretty much blocks the river at a lot of flows, and it's not obvious that it blocks the river. And particularly at lower water, there ain't no place to go really, unless you were a really hot kayaker. And what happened was there were a bunch of guys just floating the section. They didn't know about this thing, and they hit the rock, and the young lady fell out, and she was caught under the rock. And the rescue involved divers and heavy equipment. You can see some of the stuff going on the bottom left. And these guys, this was not a commercially run section, because you don't want to fool around with a rapid like this commercially. But the guides didn't know the thing was there. That's why the sign got put there. This is an accident that occurred in Goshen Pass, which is the Maury River in Virginia. The Maury River is named for Matthew Fontaine Maury, who was the head of the Confederate Navy and a major person in developing navigation techniques. And navigating Devil's Kitchen can be pretty challenging. And what happened is that fellow named Mercer Oates, 51 years old, flipped while catching an eddy and swam into that narrow congested place, and unfortunately there was a log there. It's always better to stay in your boat, and as somebody whose role has been deteriorating ever since he turned 60. I have to think twice about what I want to put myself into. This is a pin on the North Fork Feather in California, the Loban section, which is a lower section of the Tobin section. And you can see that there is a spot where a kayak got jammed. Well, unfortunately, a 37-year-old woman, an IK paddler, fell out of her boat and got jammed into that crack. Every river has its danger spots, and it's important to know as much about them as you can. Pillow Rock Rapid on the Gauley. This I remember my first run, or rather, I should say, I washed over A, which is Volkswagen Rock, and came out of my boat. Well, the fellow who this is written about, Mark Hanna, Pittsburgh paddler, 55 years old. Mark flipped going over that rock, but unlike me, that was pushed over to the left, he was pushed over to the right to B and then to C, where he was pinned. And if you want to know where C is in the lower picture, it's that red thing that is circled. And he pinned right in front of a couple of raft photographers, and they were pretty competent river people, but it was bad and fast, and they couldn't get to him in time. Flatliner Falls. This is upper Blackwater. The upper B is a big Class 5 run. I ran it once in '83, and I've never been back. I think I set the portage record, but it's now run pretty commonly. And this drop, Flatliner Falls, has had 2 vertical pins. One of them in 2010 and one in 2012. You've just got to be in the right place. Kind of scary, kind of the reason I don't run the upper B. This is an unnamed falls on the Clackamas River in British Columbia. The fellow who ran it didn't know that this log was in there. And you can see that later on, a bunch of locals went in and got the log out. Hidden hazards. Some hazards are very obvious, and some of them are not so obvious. I wasn't here. I don't know what this looked like, but clearly it was hard to spot. Sinks on the Little River in Tennessee, runs on the edge of Smoky Mountain Park. You can see the open boater is running this ledge. Well, another open boater ran it. This was that big weekend, the Ain't Louis Fest weekend, when they get like 100 canoeists all running a river together. Well, this guy flipped, and somehow as he came out of his boat, he trapped his foot. Again, you got to keep your feet tucked in, because you can see the bottom picture. That fellow in orange has a hold of the fellow's arm, and he's trying to pull him out. And again, tuck your feet, go up in a ball. Be very careful about extending legs and arms when you're being tumbled. People ask me, do these accidents affect you? And does it bum you out? And the answer is sometimes. When I was younger, back in the 70s and early 80s, I knew most of the people, and that was kind of tough. And then beyond that, some stories just really hit you hard. Now, of course, with Facebook, you can go and you can see what the people look like and their families. And I think it's important never to forget that there are real human beings, and that this is a real tragedy. Now, I'm a talker. I was present at that Unadilla drowning, and I was present I was present at another drowning in Idaho. And both times I wanted to talk. Not everybody wants to talk. Some people talking is the last thing they want to do. And you sort of have to go with the people and with their desires. And what I tell folks is this is your story. It's an opportunity to tell your story so that other paddlers can read about it and possibly avoid the same thing happening to them. Like here, this is the second drop of Great Falls, and the young lady in the picture is Shannon Christie, up and coming young paddler. She was at the race. They were doing a video of her. She was being mentored by some of the most experienced falls runners. Well, she flipped between the top drop and the lower drop and got washed over the drop you see on the upper right-hand corner of the lower picture. And that washes into something called the subway. And the top right picture you see is two guys trying to get her out of the subway. It was, once she got into that chute, it was totally irretrievable. A lot of people run Great Falls. There is a Great Falls race. And there is, the thing that happens with these big events, these water releases and these events where there are a lot of people, you think, oh, it must be fun. Everybody's running it, and you still have to pay attention. And still, getting in trouble between this first and second drop of Great Falls can be really, really serious.
Charlie, can I
Yeah.
ask a question?
Yeah.
It has to do with eliminating hazards once we know them. Is there any kind of consensus around when or how we might alter the riverbed in order to remove a hazard that's known?
I think the answer to that one is we don't want to start messing with the riverbed. There was a year in Ohiopyle where they had 3 drownings at a place called Dimple Rock, and the last drowning at Dimple Rock was a really attractive 15-year-old girl, and you don't want to kill the young ones because it gets everybody really, really upset. And the people from that town, it was a rented trip. She was in a ducky. They wanted to have this rock dynamited, and it was looked into pretty seriously. And I worked a little bit with the state of Pennsylvania, and I testified at the coroner's inquest. But basically, here's the deal: with a natural river, you are taking your own risks. Once you start modifying the river, the person who does the modifying is taking the risks, and that exposes them to liability. Now, and what you want in this sport is people making their own mind. And she was interviewed on this on this video, and it was very clear. She knew what she was doing. She was having a wonderful time. Nobody anticipated this. She was a great boater. But things happen, and so I think the consensus is we don't modify the river. And I'll talk about that in one other place because it's been talked about. But I tell you, if I did modify the river, I would modify it by myself, and I wouldn't tell a soul, because that would keep me safe. Now, as far as trees go, removing trees and other woody debris that is in a channel and poses a risk, that's pretty normal.
Thanks.
Moving on to the next one. If there, as questions pop up, you can send a text to Teresa, and we may get them at the end, but she can also break in whenever she needs to. This is a rapid on the Chiola River in North Carolina, which has about 8 water releases a year. And the fellow on the bottom left, let's see, Chris Clark, died this past year. And when he died, one of the things that people said was, holy smokes, this is where Maria died 2 years ago. So what's going on here? Because the other thing is, nobody saw what happened. And because you can tell you're paddling down through this rapid, you're not looking around a whole lot. Once you get through the rapid, you're trying to catch an eddy. You probably didn't have a good view, and a kayak pops out, and so you're chasing the kayak. Nobody saw either of these people die. Nobody knows what happened. Their body turned up downstream. But what these accidents have told us is this is a very serious drop. This drop is right below a 10-foot waterfall. And I think you run that waterfall and you think, wow, that's badass. Now I can relax. Well, this rapid here is just downstream. And in order to avoid taking this side, you have to immediately start ferrying to the right. And a lot of people, I think, sort of blunder into it. I've heard of a number of, people who just had been scared witless by what's happened in there. So what do we do here? It's just letting people know who run the show, oh, you better take this rapid seriously. This rapid has killed a couple of people. And, unfortunately, that's the way things work. I had a friend who was a state trooper, and I asked him, how do they decide which roads to salt after a snowstorm? Well, what we do is we wait until there's an accident. And people are pretty much the same all over. I like near misses a lot better. These are great stories. This is Dry Meadow Creek in California, the 7 teacups. And it looks pretty amazing if you're into waterfalls. Personally, I don't like waterfalls, but I know a lot of people who do. And what these pictures don't show you is that there are 2 more drops. And one of the guys who was running it, he sort of lost count, and he went over the next to last drop, which was a 20-footer on the rocks, broke both his arms. He's out of his boat, sort of recirculating in one of these pools, and the next drop was like a 50-footer onto a pile of broken rocks. It was not survivable. The rescue was made by Corin Addison, who did some very delicate climbing, because you can see what this terrain is like, to get into a place where he was able to grab the guy and get him out. And I was a little nervous about talking to Corin, because back then he was marketing his kayaks, and he'd say things like, I don't want fat women or gray-haired men in my boats, kind of thing, which kind of pissed me off. But when I talked to him, he was very modest. I mean, he's describing what he did, and it's like, well, how difficult was the climbing? He said, well, probably 5'6", 5'8", and this is barefoot. and he described how he got him out and how he helped him up, and he was very complimentary to the guy who he said was very tough and really helped out a lot. And it's like, obviously, this guy has a public persona that doesn't tell the whole story. Tallulah Gorge in Georgia. This is another release place. And this is Oceana Falls. Woohoo, it's a big drop. I have no desire to run this one, but a lot of people do. And you see the bottom picture, the bottom right, there's this shelf of rock comes out. And if you go flying down this rapid and you hit that shelf of rock, it's going to be ugly. And the accident that I'm talking about involved Harriet Taylor, who's the daughter of an old paddling buddy of mine. She hit that rock head on, and it bent like the front foot of her boat up, and she broke both her ankles. Her group, when she, naturally she was swimming in the hole at the bottom, her group got her together, carried her up to the top of the drop, put her in the kayak so she could ferry across to the other side of the river, and then carried her to the stairs where they were able to get help. Good crew to be with. My buddy once said that Harriet was conceived at the Lookout Mountain campground. And if he'd have known what he was getting into, he would have named her Lookout Taylor. Pete Morgan Rapid, Cheat Canyon. It's the drop that you see at the top, that's the last chute, and there is a rock in the middle of it, right behind the first wave. I refer to it as Buford Puser Rock. You guys may not remember Buford Puser. He was a sheriff in a movie, Walking Tall, who beat people over the head with a 2x4. And that's what you look like when you've gone through. A couple of my friends have really gotten banged up in it. But there was a group, it was a group from DC in there, and a woman came out and she was having a lot of neck pain. Well, Jeff Davis was the trip leader, and Jeff and he was with Mike Aronoff, who's also very competent, and they handled this. They cut up a couple of kayak foam wall and used duct tape to create a neck brace, and then they took the flotation out of an open canoe so she could sit in front of the paddler, and they paddled her out the last few rapids, which are, they're like class 2, class 3. And I complimented Jeff on the rescue because, they got her to the hospital. She had a broken neck. She was in halo traction for a while. And I said, Jeff, that was an amazing rescue. You did such a good job. And he said, well, if I'd have known for sure that her neck was broken, I probably would have had her stay there and called for help. Well, that's one of the things that you have to balance, especially with spinal injuries. But here's the deal. Let's just say they decided to leave her on the beach at the bottom of Pete Morgan with a couple of people. 30 minutes to the takeout, 30 minutes to the nearest phone, because we didn't have cell phones back then. And when they called 911, the Mason Town Rescue Squad is not just sitting there waiting for some dumbass kayaker to need help. They've got people, they've got lives and families, so it'll take them at least a half an hour to get there and a half an hour to get down to the creek. And then they've got easily an hour or more of really rough hiking. And if you haven't hiked on the side of an Appalachian Canyon, you know what I'm talking about. And so that if this happens at 3, they're not getting to her until 7:30, and it's getting dark out there. Getting people out by water is always better in terms of speed, but there are risks to it. This is a strainer rescue in the town run of the Arkansas River. The person being rescued was a ducky paddler, and the local guide saw what happened. And as you can see, they did what needed to be done. And that starts with getting as close as you can and putting your muscle to the problem. You don't want to be setting up some rope system. Somebody will drown while you do that. Here's an open canoe entrapment. We don't see many aluminum canoes. This is on the Buffalo River in Arkansas. But what happens with these aluminum boats is when they pin, they fold, and things get caught in it, like your feet. Now, this here, the river was probably 3 feet higher when this boat pinned. And as you can see, this fellow had a kind of a desperate moment trying to get out. You really have to think about entrapment, and it's something that modern kayak designs have taken a lot of the risk out. Bigger cockpits, better wall systems, but you need to pay attention. And if something is causing you problems, you need to fix it. This is a rescue at the Room of Doom, which is at the left side of Pillow Rock Rapid. Room of Doom was something I made it a point to stay the hell out of. I mean, it's ugly in there, as you can see. But this is Gauley Festival, and people like to try and catch the Yeti in the room, and some of them have a hard time. So, but fortunately, there's a huge crowd waiting to catch them. So I think if you're going to get into the Room of Doom, that's the time to do it. A rescue on the Chioa. This is Bear Creek Falls, and a local rescue squad gets practice by providing safety at Bear Creek Falls. So they're out there with all their gear, practicing their rescue techniques. You can see this guy ended up at this eddy at the top of halfway down the falls. And look what would have happened if he had just gone over. He would have dropped over that next drop, and it looks like it's kind of full of rocks. In fact, that drop is notorious for being rocky. You've got to know exactly where you're going. So what the rescue squad did is they got him out on the rock, and then they penduled him from that rock into the main current, where he could be picked up by a kayaker. Really good technique. Here's another Chiola rescue. Let's just say that if you go to a Chiola release, you better go ready to play. I have tried to do the Chiola twice, and this is my second run. And I got to the rapid above this falls, and I said to myself, you know, if I was not having a good day, and if I get caught up in one of these pour overs, I'll flip, and if I flip, I might swim, and if I swim, I'm going over that falls, and no thank you. So just as I'm taking out and carrying, the young fellow you see on that rock right at the lip of the falls, he was actually the Barry Grimes' son. We were having an American Whitewater meeting that weekend, and he managed to get on that rock. And we're all sitting there saying, oh, what are we going to do about this? And they said, we decided to send for NOC. And NOC had a fellow, the trip leader was Shane Williams. And Shane is a river rescue instructor, and he is a great riverman, as this rescue will show. What they did, I was thinking, oh my God, we're going to have to do a Telfer lower. And does anybody know how to get 600 feet of half-inch rescue rope on short notice? Well, clearly nobody did, but this is using a regular throw line and a raft. What they did was they launched the raft and the throw line, and you couldn't lower it directly. So the guys pull the boat out into the current, and then it swings back, they lower it a bit, and then they pull it out into the current. Keep penduluming back and forth until it's in the right position, and then they get the person. Such a slick rescue, and the thing is, you didn't need to set up, complicated Telfer lower. This was just a regular, it would have to be a pro level throw bag with good braking strength, and a raft, and they were probably using some kind of a carabiner brake. Pin and entrapment rescues can get pretty intense. I don't know much about these stories, but they were good pictures, so I thought I'd share them. This is a rapid again on the Tobin Run of North Fork of the Feather. You do not want to run it on the right where you see that yellow kayak in top left, because there is this unique hole in the rock that fits a kayak perfectly. And this gentleman here is not the first gentleman who has been caught in there. I think, in fact, Risa was the first person who got caught in there. So it's important to know about these things. I can see you'd be coming down and say, oh, I don't want to run out here. I might hit these rocks. I'm going to just go on the inside. We know better now. This is a rescue and initiation rapid on the Gauley. Now, initiation is a very straightforward rapid. Nice run down the left side. Well, about halfway down, there's a great surf wave. People surf that wave. They get blown over to the far right. And then they go down what looks like a nice slide. Well, the slide is actually two rocks. They start out about 5 feet apart. They narrow down to about 3 feet apart. And there is a rock about the size of a triple basketball jammed into that crack. So the water sort of lines them up with the crack and then sucks them down. They either pin stern first or bow first. This guy pinned bow first, which is a much easier rescue. And you can see the group is working hard to get him out. And this is just a bunch of people, probably from several groups that rallied to help out. And this place is not to be fooled with. There have been 2 fatalities here and a lot of rescues because people just can't pass that wave up. There is a sign up at the put in that talks about this danger, but I don't run the upper anymore. My roll isn't good enough, but I ran it for about 35 years. And there was a time when every time we ran, we'd see a couple of people, we'd see somebody pinned in there. Either somebody usually it was a kayak stuck in there and somebody sitting there with a rather sheepish look on their face. This is a stump pin on the Chioa. There have been several instances of this. There was a fatal on the Mulberry River in Arkansas, which resulted in a suit against Perception Kayaks. But in this case, the guy is reenacting what happened. And he was saved because somebody saw what happened and paddled right up and put his bow under it. And this technique has been used to help a lot of people who are entrapped. And it works really well. A friend of mine, Heather Rao, used it to when she was guiding to save a woman who was foot entrapped. Good technique. It let him held above water until they could wade out and get him out. You sort of see from that picture on the left, that's the actual rescue. Upper Nantahala River, North Carolina, again during a release. It's a pretty continuous class 3+4. And then there's a section upstream that when I worked at the center in 74, I ran the last 3 drops. Well, now people are running all 8 of the drops, and some of them would make me very nervous. But this is on the lower section. The guy you see in the green is Rob Kelly. A woman came out of her boat upstream and washed into the tree. And Rob was driving a shuttle bus for NOC. He saw what was happening, and he goes into the river. And I mean, look at him. No life jacket, no helmet, but he was Johnny on the spot. And he saved this lady's life by reacting quickly and getting himself right to where he was needed. And this is the most amazing rescue I've ever seen. I call it the Midnight Miracle on Kanawha Falls, on the Kanawha River, just below the mouth of the Gauley. Now, you see there's an overhead view of the falls on the left, and it shows the undercut rock that is on the lower right. Well, the day this accident occurred, that entire ledge that you see out of water was underwater. And it started when I'm just going to run through so I can, oh, there we go. A woman named Felicia Conyer, who was a fisher, who was fishing, but she also did some paddling. She sees this red boat floating around below the falls. She called 911. When they didn't show up fast enough, she called them again. Then she notices there is one van out in the middle of the parking lot. She goes up and she looks at the van, and there's a note on it with a phone number. She calls the number. Well, it's a guy who was doing drone photography. He took a picture of him running the falls. So she's got a pretty good idea of what's going on. And she posted this picture, which eventually made its way around the internet. And so this picture gets spotted by Corey Lilly, Stephen Wright, and Matt Jackson, who were elite level paddlers in the Fayetteville area. And these guys decided that they knew where this guy was, and there was no way the rescue squad was going to do it. The guy was probably in that rescue crack deep overhang area in the lower picture. There was probably a sheet of water coming over it. If he was going to get rescued, they were going to have to do it. He'd probably been in there since 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was 10 o'clock. Oh my goodness. So they rally people. They go down to the park. Matt Jackson is trained with rescue squads, and so he was able to sort of smooth the way. And the guys that looked, they were taking out, and it's like, yeah, have at it. They went out there and they found him very quickly, and they got him out. If you want to read about it, go to the American Whitewater safety page, because there is a lot of stuff written about it. And the top right picture, that's the group who made the rescue. I'll tell you what, if somebody had called me at 10 o'clock at night and wanted me to poke around at the bottom of a waterfall and look for people, I'm not sure I would have done it. But these guys knew what they were about. They knew the place, and they knew what they had to do. Now, wanted to say a few things about rescue squads. This is the work they normally do: flood rescue, stranded person rescue. That picture is, you can see the fight. You can tell who the firefighter is. He's got the real life jacket, the helmet. Searching for missing people, and vehicle in the water rescues. Now, whitewater paddlers, we watch out for each other. And when we have something go wrong, it's normally something that is still evolving and moves pretty quickly. We don't call the rescue squad for stranded people or pinned boats. If we call a rescue squad, it's probably because somebody has been very seriously injured. We watch out for each other, and typically the people they rescue, they're running by themselves, and so nobody's watching out for them. And there are some cultural differences. Paddlers deal with rapidly evolving situations. They respond individually or in small groups. Advanced paddlers have thousands of hours of experience. They are personally responsible for their safety. They routinely rescue well-equipped companions. But they often assume that first responders are inexperienced and unskilled. They see their rescues as being slow-moving and overcautious. And it's just a difference between what they're dealing with. Now look at this picture. This is the Anchorage Rescue Squad. A kayaker was pinned under a tree, and they go in with a power boat, and they have a chainsaw. Whew, that is badass. First responders have better teamwork, more resources. They train for that. Much less experience with moving water. Someone who's had Swiftwater 1 and 2 and maybe is part of a team that trains 1 day a month, they've got as much experience as somebody who's taken a week of rivers course and goes paddling 1 week a month. They arrive when the situation has stabilized. And they don't get a lot of live people they're rescuing. A lot of times it's somebody who's missing, or somebody stuck in a car or whatever. Rescued victims are not experienced and have no safety gear, so they have to take a lot more precautions with these people. It's one thing to pull your buddy out when he's got a life jacket, helmet, and cold weather gear. It's another thing when it's a pregnant woman and her 3-year-old daughter in a car that's stuck in the middle of the river. They have a top-down command system. They work well as a team, and they expect to be in charge. And it's like, well, why don't they take help from paddlers? Well, the thing is, they don't know who the hell we are. You can go and say, hey, I'm a paddler. I've got Swiftwater rescue experience. I'd like to help. They don't know if you're telling the truth or if you've been watching too much daytime TV. And more than that, they are used to working with the people who they have. And there's some great stories online about how people work successfully with rescue squads. Martins Rapids, Mackenzie River, Oregon, Class 3. This shows the difference between paddlers and rescue squads. Because if this was a guy if these two gentlemen were with a group, somebody probably would have paddled up to them, gotten them out of their boats, and probably unpinned the boat. But instead, they're just sitting there until somebody notices that they're there. 911 is called. They send a rescue boat out there, but the rescue boat can't get close enough to the rock to help them. So they end up being pulled out by a helicopter. And if you give me a choice of going out on a raft or on a helicopter, I'll take the raft every time. Helicopters are expensive, and there are a whole lot of variabilities. But because you don't have people in first responders who are skilled paddlers, they often drop back to this. These are some more pictures of that rescue of a bunch of kayakers who found a strainer and got stuck on an island in Pocono Creek in Pennsylvania. You can tell the firefighters, they're the ones with helmets and good life jackets. Here's some more pictures of that Anchorage Fire Department rescue on the Eagle River in Alaska. Like I said, man, that is very serious sort of thing. You could not get anything better. Now, dams still remain a problem, and so often first responders think if they get some special piece of equipment, that will solve the problem. In this case, it's an airboat. Airboats do really badly in moving water. And there's a lot of information out on this because basically the air cushion that they ride on, well, it isn't there because all the frothy water breaks it up. And so these folks got, we're doing a test. They got stuck in the backwash of the dam. In that middle picture is a firefighter who washed out of the dam unconscious and needed mouth to mouth. Helicopter rescue, well, in some areas, that's the best way to do it. There was a paddler seriously injured running the Atom Bomb Falls Gorge on Cherry Creek. And they had an EPIRB with them, which sends out an emergency signal and gives them your GIS position. And in California, they have pretty good helicopter coverage thanks to the California Highway Patrol, and they will send a helicopter for you. Before we end, I wanted to talk just a little bit about a key difference, because when I first started, the idea was the leader managed a rescue. And this is how a lot of rescue squads work. The leader manages the overall scene, positions the key people. The rigger is the person who's working on the boat, shore support, downstream safety, upstream lookout, and directs the action. Problem. Non-commercial paddler groups seldom designate a leader. When was the last time you designated a leader? I can't think of one. Whoops, go back.
They need water, yeah.
If you designate a leader, that leader may be out of position when the accident happened. I can remember Kenny in the lower Gauley. Another guy ended up eddying out and comforting a group of customers pinned at Gateway to Heaven until the trip leader, who was easily a half-mile downstream, made his way back up. And in rapidly evolving situations, the best positioned paddler is the best rescue. So one of the things that I started pushing a few years ago, based on my experience on the river, was paddler rescues don't have a designated leader. They don't need a designated leader. There are 5 positions that need to be filled. The first person gets as close to the accident site as possible. You want to put your muscle power to work. If you're not skilled enough to get there, you get as close as you can and start blowing your whistle and calling for help. One of the things, you can sometimes get several people working on a situation, but you got to be real careful that you don't overload the rock where there's a pinning situation, because then you have 5 people on the rock and 3 of them are trying to keep from being knocked off and the other 2 are having a hard time working because there's no room. Second person lands on a nearby rock or shore with a throw bag. Or you can do it from your boat, but the throw bag is really good backup, because if somebody needs a rope, they can get it very, very quickly. Someone lands on the opposite side of the chute. Sometime when we have more time, I can tell you how my buddy Ned Hughes got me out of a vertical pin by going to the other side from where everybody was. He does that pretty routinely. One person becomes the upstream lookout. This is very important on busy eastern rivers. On less used rivers, you can probably just have somebody sort of keeping an eye out. but not doing it exclusively. And then you have downstream safety. Don't wait to be told what to do. Look for the job that needs to be done, then do it. If you've got the rigger at the accident site, go set safety. Go upstream and get your throw bag out. Ask if you need an upstream lookout. And then the other thing, I ran into at one of these clinics, a rescue squad guy who was talking about all the different groups that had to be created before you could respond to a rescue. And there were a whole bunch, but one of them was a first aid group and an evacuation group. Well, we both know that once you get people out, most of the time they don't need first aid and they don't need evacuation. They just sit on shore, maybe have a bite of food, and then they're ready to go. And a lot of times, if they're injured, they can walk out. First aid and evacuation happens when they're needed, and oftentimes when you've got a long or particularly nasty rescue, or you get somebody in, it's pretty obvious. That's when you send for help. I remember I was on the upper yacht, and there was a guy. A couple of people were trying to relocate his shoulder, and they weren't doing very well. And so I went up to them and sort of gently said, "Well, this shoulder isn't going in. We need to start thinking about the next step." And I sent somebody for help, walked the guy up the shore, and helped him because they're big rocks and such. Sat him down, took his pulse, and it was like 52 or something. And I'm going, "Oh, what's a low pulse? What's a low pulse? What's a low pulse?" And so I say, "Your pulse is very low." And he says, "I'm a marathon runner." And watching him evacuate himself, because we got his shoulder immobilized. He practically ran out of it. And his buddy who was going along to help him could barely keep up. But when it's clear that somebody is going to need additional support, that's when you go for evacuation. And now there's only one other thing that I would say is that sometimes, as my friend William Neely said, it is better to be lucky than good. And rivers are remarkably forgiving, except when they're not. And we all try to be as alert as possible. We can manage things pretty well, but there's always the unexpected. But like I said, fortunately, rivers are forgiving. And now I'm gonna pop out and see if there are any questions.
Well, I've got a pretty good list from asking the Canoe Club earlier, and if more people have questions, feel free to type them into the chat window. Are you ready, Charlie?
What's that?
Are you ready?
Yeah.
What would you say to people that boat solo or in pairs?
Well, solo boating adds a level of risk, and I've solo boated, but when I do something like that, I try to cut back my other risks. Like if I'm solo boating, I'm going to run a river that is well below my skill level. It's not going to be in extreme weather conditions. It's not going to be in extreme high water. And I'm going to be pretty sure that my gear is in good shape. And I don't do it often because I really like people.
Yeah.
But the big thing that you got to understand when you run solos, if something goes wrong, you're going to get no help. And even, most of us aren't going to get banged up unless we're soloing something really serious, but might lose your boat. And that kind of sucks.
Mm-hmm. All right. Is there a difference between accident rates between kayaks and canoes?
I don't have an answer to that, because one of the problems that we have is we don't know how many there are out there. We did a study that isolated whitewater paddlers from a number of managed rivers where we could get user numbers, and we found that the accident rates were very comparable to things like rock climbing. But I'll tell you what's really dangerous: bicycling. Bicycling is about twice as dangerous as paddling. And commercial rafting is about half as dangerous as private
Oh, that's interesting.
boats.
Mhm. So kind of backing all the way up to foot entrapment, because I noticed on your graph of the top reasons for whitewater fatalities that it wasn't on there.
It's not,
And
it's not that frequent.
yeah, it's not that common. Do you have any thoughts about the kind of rock structure or the types of rivers where it's more likely or less likely, or is that just unknown?
Well, I think some rivers are sort of notorious for undercuts, particularly a lot of the eastern rivers with with undercut ledges. But reputation for pinning things. And,
We've gone into a wormhole.
yep.
Are
But
you
I,
there? Yeah.
I think the thing that we really you really need to remember.
That is a very strange effect, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I have one person asking about how common is it to get your face bashed in while rolling?
Not particularly common, but it does happen.
Yeah, I
Um,
thought that
like
too.
wear helmets, but paddlers didn't wear helmets for a fairly long time. Like in the early to mid '60s, you will see a lot of pictures of paddlers just bare chested with with no helmet or life jacket.
Mm-hmm.
But
Don't
it doesn't
see that so
happen
much.
very often to get our attention.
Yeah, but now we have this sort of a bubble of COVID newbies, people that have just acquired equipment and are getting on the water and they don't know to wear a helmet. How do we reach those people?
I'm not worried about them not knowing enough to wear helmets. I'm worried about them not knowing enough to wear a life
Yes.
jacket. And it's a real problem. I think it's a challenge for the sport as a whole. We used to do outreach, and we gave packets of safety information, but that hasn't been done in a long time. And truthfully, that whoever's doing it needs to get in through the box stores, because the real action is in flat water and ocean. And just as with whitewater, the problem is not wearing a life jacket, not respecting extremes of water and weather, i.e., cold water, high water, really bad storms, and then of course there's the old favorite of abusing alcohol or drugs.
Mm-hmm. True. Okay, I've got, well, several more, but one more at least. Have you been involved in any litigation? Have you got to be an expert witness?
I've worked in about 50 cases.
Oh,
Now,
wow, a lot.
well, I've been doing this for a long time,
Yeah.
and you couldn't make a living out of it. And I'd say probably 3/4 of them are commercial outfitting deaths, and then you have some deaths involving youth programs, a couple of suits against manufacturers, one suit against the city because the plaintiff was saying, well, rivers are navigable, so they should be lit up, and the proper channel should be done just like an interstate highway. I didn't get very far, but I got to fly out to the Midwest and give a deposition. There was another one that was a tubing accident where the people gave them the tube and told them, this is how you get to the put in. Well, what they did is a car turned left, and they thought that they were supposed to follow when they should have turned right. And then they lost track of the car, and they went down this road, and they put in a river above a dam, and
Oh,
it,
no.
and it killed them. And right now I'm working with a lawyer who, there were a couple of swimmers killed below a dam. It's a really strange story because some kids were there and the dam released, the water came up, the mother started screaming, and two exchange students from Lorraine jumped into the water. But I don't think they thought about whether they could swim or not. Apparently they could not. And they both died. And there, people are are suing the dam owners, the power company. Each one is a little different, and I turned down some that I'm just not comfortable with.
Yeah. All right, last one, and it's kind of a combo question, but I've gotten this from several different people in different ways, and basically people are interested in your idea of what skills we should focus on learning or teaching to each other in order to prevent accidents and also to be ready for them when they do occur, especially within a club context since we're a paddling club.
Well, preventing accidents, starts out with boat control and skills, learning how to roll, learning how to maneuver the boat. Because best accident is the one that doesn't happen. And one of the frustrating things for me is that as I've gotten older, I've been manhandled by a few rapids that I used to handle pretty routinely 20, 30 years ago. And then as far as a swiftwater rescue course, if you're paddling a lot, it's really helpful. My swiftwater rescue course coming in was working as a river guide. And you'd watch the guys do it, and then eventually you do it yourself. And we were young and we were tough, and everything worked out all right. But if you're not going to be a river guide on the lower Yacht, a swiftwater rescue course is a good thing. I know that there are a bunch of people who teach out west. The people who I'm most impressed with is Julie Munger and her partner at Sierra South. They teach courses, and some of them are probably a little beyond my ability physically, but she and her people are very capable, and she's also got a great rescue book. People have asked me why I don't reprint my rescue book, and it's like, well, I'd have to update it, and basically I'd have a hard time doing as good a job as Julie did. Mine was good for its time, but everything moves along. And if there are more questions, I'm not rushed.
I think we've taken it pretty late, and I've asked most of mine. So if no one else has questions,
Well, let's do this, Teresa.
The name of the book, Charlie, before you start, Deborah.
Sure.
What was the name of your book?
It's actually out of print. It's called Whitewater Rescue.
Whitewater Rescue, and it's out of print. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
You can get it on Kindle.
Yeah.
What happened was I went with a subsidiary of Random House, thinking big publisher, this is great. Well, the publishing industry crashed, and that business got sold and resold, and my book, because it wasn't selling that well, got lost in the shuffle.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm so grateful.
Oh my gosh, Teresa and Charlie, y'all have done it again. Another phenomenal presentation. We're getting lots of great comments in the chat about Charlie, how much your presentation was appreciated by everyone. So thank you, thank you, thank you. For those that missed the intro, just a reminder that the Lower Columbia Canoe Club is actually offering a swiftwater rescue class in partnership with Wet Planet. We've got two different sessions. There's one on May 1st and May 2nd. There's another one May 8th and May 9th. And it's entirely possible, frankly, that both of those sessions are full. And so if you try to register and determine that in fact they are full, it would help the board a lot if you would send us an email just to let us know that you were interested, in which case we can add additional sessions to the calendar. Teresa, thank you. Charlie, thank you. I know that Charlie, you just said that you'd hang out for a few more questions, and this happens literally every time, Teresa, that you put on a safety discussion, we try to do it on time, and then we go over. And but I have to tell you, I mean, people are hanging on your every word. You know, they're leaving now, but they were not leaving 5 seconds ago. They were there the whole time. So hang out if you like, and if not, we'll see you in 2 weeks for the next talk.
Very much.
Yeah, that was great, Charlie. It's just always good to get your perspective.
Well, it's it's the stories that come out of this. I'm a storyteller, and the stories that come out of this are amazing. I mean, some of the people, you get everything, and the fact that the stories are helpful to people, that's an added benefit. I learned because when I was at summer camp, we used to go through the Appalachian Mountain Club's journal and read the accident reports, and I was fascinated by them. And I think we all are, because basically we're trying not to be an accident ourselves.
Mm-hmm. So true. So your 5 key points for how to deal when someone does get pinned, first person get as close as possible. Next person land across the river.
Next person get as close to them as they can on shore or rock with a throw bag for backup.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's often really helpful. And then from there, getting somebody upstream and downstream is important. And as I said, my buddy Ned always goes to the other side of the river, and quite often it's like, oh, we need to work from the other side. Well, he's already there.
Go Ned. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that strikes me as something that we should train on. We should get that as a sort of a built-in plan of action for in the event of.
Yeah. Now, of course, it doesn't work for everything. If it was something where you need to say do a stabilization line, or that, or unpin a boat with a Z drag, it's obviously going to change a little bit. But most of the time, I mean, I can't tell you when the last time I used a Z drag was. It was probably to pull somebody out of a ditch. And,
yeah, tie down a boat.
And I hope none of you have to use a stabilization line. It's a great technique, but it's, like really desperate situation.
Any other questions? It seems like everybody's saying goodbye now.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
I do love Sue's comment, though. She just said, this was very informative. Charlie would be great fun around a campfire on a multi-day trip.
That is true. When are you coming out west, Charlie?
Well, I'll tell you something. I've been on some overnight trips.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody has asked me about this stuff. And I understand it. It's kind of a downer, but I don't, when I'm on the river, I don't push this stuff. And if somebody wants to talk to me about it, that's fine, because it's a major interest of mine. But I was when I was in the Grand Canyon, when I went down the road, people, and on the Middle Fork of the Salmon, I mean, people knew what I did, but nobody came up to me and asked questions if you wanted to talk about things. And I think when you're on the river, particularly a multi-day trip, that might not necessarily be the rabbit hole you want to go down.
No, I agree. But I know from paddling with you that you're simply reliable and conservative on the water, and that you're not spouting horror stories by any means.
I don't tell this stuff in general discussions unless somebody asks me about it.
Sure.
Sure. Well, we're so glad that you shared your stories tonight, Charlie, and your expertise. And definitely want to thank you for the work that you're doing. I'm hoping that there's a plan for someone to take over for you.
Well, there's been some talk about it, and I think basically to do it properly, I think it's going to have to be a staff. I think a staff assignment, because what I do is sort of an odd hobby, and there are a few people like Teresa who have similar interests, but they're few and far between. And for somebody to do it and to do it regularly and keep the database going, and of course the question is why bother? So what if some things happen? Well, having that database gives us tremendous respect when we go in and talk to river managers. We don't have to, I can remember going in the 70s where we had to fight this idea that we were all a bunch of crazy people. But now that doesn't happen. And I like to think that the accident reporting is part of it. Because the Coast Guard, when we did a study for the Coast Guard in the mid-70s, when they were proposing level flotation for canoes and kayaks. They're not a very good idea, but they said, "Oh, it works in motorboats. Why not this?" Well, we repeated a study that had been done by one of their contractors, and they were impressed because we're a group. We wear life jackets and helmets. We take precautions, and we study accidents. Makes us a lot like airplane pilots in that respect. Although I don't investigate the way the NTSB would. I'm really telling a story. I'm not investigating where I'm talking to multiple witnesses and trying to create a timeline. I know because I've done that for some of the legal cases, and unless somebody wants to pay you a lot of money, you're not going to get flown all over the country to do that. A lot of times I'm talking to people online, and these stories come, and I try to put the story that makes the most sense together. And if there's a dispute, I try to figure which person is the most credible. Like there was a dispute and accident in Mexico where there were some people locally who were pretty upset with the outfitter. And it's like, I'm not going to be able to untangle this quarrel. So that I've really got to go with the outfitter. And the outfitter wrote a good report, and that's what went out. But I didn't investigate it. I just try to put the best story together, kind of like a newspaper reporter.
Yeah. I investigated one incident, and what I mean by investigated was out of my own curiosity. And because there was so little information about it, I interviewed everyone that I knew was on the trip and tried to get all of their stories to match together. And that was hard. And it really wasn't worth what I put into it. I didn't learn that much.
Sometimes you don't need all that much detail.
Sure.
With one of the things that you try to do for lawyers is to point out what's important and what isn't. Like with a rafting accident, they'll start out with, the boat was bad, the life jacket was bad, the guide wasn't trained properly, the company just a laundry list of things.
Right, which is all probably incorrect.
This is the one I'm worried about. This is the one where I think they have the most leverage. And occasionally I've gone to some suits and I call them up and I say, I've read your information and I have only one question. Why is this in court? And, I worked for a plaintiff's lawyer who deliberately withheld information from me. And I don't know what the hell he thought he was doing, because at the trial, this guy comes up and testifies. And basically he was trying to make out that this kid drowned because he wasn't issued a life jacket. And this was back in the early 70s when that was not normal. And what I said was that he was offered a life jacket and he didn't take it. And at some point people have to be responsible. But this as this thing was going on, this guy who they didn't tell me about. I kept asking, who is this Tim Shell? Should I be reading his? Oh no, you don't want to read that. Tim Shell was a lifeguard who that day was in a swimming area with his family when these two kids blundered in there with their canoe, not once but twice, and flipped in the swimmers area the second time, and there were beer cans floating all over the place. And it's like, you know, I don't know why you bothered to bring the case when you knew that testimony was coming, because that just killed your case. Of course, I got my experience, and my number one experience was that I didn't much like working with plaintiffs' attorneys.
Mhm.
But I've just been really impressed with all that Teresa's been doing for your club, and you know, I'm trying to get her connected with American Whitewater, so she's going to share some of the wealth with the entire country. But it's really good writing and really good programming, and you know, that's something you see a lot of.
We need more safety-oriented material.
Mm-hmm.
Well, on that might be the perfect note to say goodnight, Charlie.
Right.
Mhm.
Could not agree with you more that Teresa over the years has just added so much to the Lower Columbia Canoe Club. We're happy to have her, and we're equally happy to share her nationally. So you give her that platform, Charlie.
You're here.
Thanks, guys.
All right, everyone. We will see you, for those that are members, in 2 days, Thursday, March 18th at noon for the Talk with Noria Newman. And for those of you that are going to run through the whole safety series with us, we'll see you in 2 weeks for a discussion with Priscilla Macy on decision making. Same time, same channel.
Yeah,
All right.
it's gonna be good.
Good night, everyone. Thank you, Teresa. Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Deborah. Goodbye, everybody.